I went to one of my local grocery stores who had pork tenderloin on sale this week, so I bought a little over 12 pounds for $21. And I already have my jars ready, and I went ahead and cut up my pork into strips and then chunks to get it ready to can. Today I'll be using a 23-quart pressure canner. It is the dial gauge. So I'm going to be getting ready to put my seasonings onto my pork. And I'm going to start with a street taco seasoning mix and just sprinkle that all over it. And I'm going to stir that up really good, mix it well, and then I'm going to add a few other additional spices as well. Okay, for my extra spices, I'm going to add a little bit of onion powder. Sprinkle that over it really well. And then I'm going to add some smoked paprika. I like the flavor of this, so just sprinkle that over it really well. And some garlic powder. So give that a good sprinkle. And I'm going to mix that up really well and get it ready to put into my jars. Now I wanted to be sure to put enough in there to get it almost full. I wasn't for sure how much juices this meat would make because I am raw packing it. So I'm not adding any liquid, I'm just putting the meat into the jars only. So I didn't go all the way to that bottom rim, but I got close to it. Now I have all 8 of my pint wide mouth jars filled with meat. So as you can see here, this is how it looks in a closer up view. And that smells really, really great with those seasonings on there. And you can put whatever seasonings you like. It's a personal preference, so totally up to you. Next, we're going to add 3 quarts of water to the bottom of our pressure canner. It's required in the manual to have at least, but no more than 3 quarts. And we're going to add those 3 quarts into our pressure canner. And there are little lines on the inside of the pressure canner. So that very bottom line is where the water has to go to the top of. So let's get our 3 quarts of water put into there. Next, I'm going to use a paper towel and add a little bit of vinegar to my paper towel and go over and wipe the rims of my jars so that I'm getting any extra fat that might have gotten on that rim or seasonings, because I want to get that cleaned off because it helps to make the seal very well. And I usually do put my flats and lids in a bowl of hot water until I'm ready. So now I'm going to put my flats on each jar put the ring on there, and I'm going to finger tighten it. You don't want to get it really, really tight. One step that I did forget was adding a little bit of salt. I wanted to put some Himalayan salt, so I went back and reopened the lid and added my salt to each of my jars. You don't have to do salt. It's totally optional. If it gets too salty, you can rinse your meat when you get ready to cook it. But now we're going to get ready to put it into our canner. On this particular canner, you have to line that V up with the V on the handle. And then we have all of our jars already in there with our water. And we have our heat turned on. So I'm going to start it kind of high in the beginning. And I'll adjust my temperature as it starts to show a steady vent. But make sure your lid is on there really good and tight. You want to make sure that vent steam is clear, so hold it up to a light and look through it before you vent it. Another step I forgot to do was add just a little bit of white vinegar to my water. This keeps it from getting your jars kind of powdery looking. This helps them to stay very clean if you add just a little bit of vinegar in there. And some of this meat had a lot of fat on it, so I trimmed off enough so that I could have 3 bags of pork just for seasoning. And I use those to season green beans, pinto beans, dried beans, that sort of thing. Okay, once our pressure canner starts to vent the steam out of the top, we will actually set our timer for 10 minutes because it's very important that we let that steam vent out for 10 minutes before we start letting our canner build pressure. And you can hear it starting to heat up inside the canner. There's several safety features on here to keep it from overheating. There's one in the front and one in the back. So you can't overheat these things. Well, you can, but those safety features are going to kick in, and that little black one, the rubber piece, will pop out if it gets too hot. But you have to keep an eye on your temperature. Okay, now you see the steam that's starting to come out of our steam vent. So we're setting our timer for 10 minutes. We're going to let that steam for a full 10 minutes, and then we will put our weight on there and let it start building pressure. You might have to adjust your temperature down a little bit. Just keep an eye on it. I'm using a gas stove, so this one gets pretty hot. So this is my counterweight, and this is going to cap off that steam and allow that pressure on the dial gauge to build. And we are going to be at 11 pounds of pressure today for 75 minutes because I'm doing pints. So now I have the counterweight on there, and I'm going to keep an eye on my dial and let it get up to 11 pounds of pressure. And I set my timer for 75 minutes after that. But we're going to let it build pressure first. Here you can see the little gauge on my dial. It's starting to build pressure, so we're going to let that get up closer to about 8, and then I'll probably start turning my temperature down about right here in order to let it get up to 11, and then I may have to continue to adjust until it stays right at 11 pounds of pressure. So now we're at 10, and I think I did have to adjust my temperature a couple times. And here we are right at 11. So 11 pounds of pressure is where I'm going to start my timer at 75 minutes. And then again, I have to adjust my temperature. On this gas stove, it usually goes almost all the way down to the low because it gets pretty hot in order to keep it steady right at 11 pounds. And right back here, this little rubber gasket is a safety feature. If that pressure gets too much inside that canner, that will actually pop out and the steam will go straight up. So just don't keep your face over there right over that. Stay back away from it, but continue to watch it during the whole time. Don't walk off and leave it cooking on its own. So now I have successfully pressure canned my tenderloin for 75 minutes, and I let it cool down until it got all the way to the zero before I took my weight off. And then they recommend you wait 10 minutes even after you take your weight off before you open the lid. So I open my lid. Just open your lid away from your face because that steam will come up. You don't want that right in your face. And then I'm gonna get my jar grabber and get my jars of meat out and sit them on the counter to let them cool and seal. So here I have all 8 jars out. You can see that liquid is still boiling a little bit in there. So you're gonna make sure you sit it on top of a towel. Don't sit it directly on your counter. And you're just gonna let this sit overnight before you take those lids off. I'll do that tomorrow. But I put a towel over it to help keep the heat in and absorb some of that water that was on the top of those flats. So now I have 8 pints of canned pork. Please like and subscribe to my channel so that you can see future tutorials.